Those vegan guys. Thank you.
Hello there. This shall be an exercise in completion, as reminded by my lovely friend Starcradle. So dedicate this video to you, Starcradle. In our live on Sunday, I had not completed my reading of Seneca on the shortness of life. I've already done 2 parts of this, both videos of which I will link up there, and it's quite likely this might be a long one, because I'd like to get this finished, really, you know, completed. So I'm going to start off from exactly where I left off in part 2. It would be tedious to mention individually those who have spent all their lives playing draughts or ball or carefully cooking themselves in the sun. They are not at leisure, whose pleasures involve a serious commitment. For example, nobody will dispute that those people are busy about nothing who spend their time on useless literary studies. Even among the Romans there is now a large company of these. It used to be a Greek failing. How racist is all this? To want to know how many oarsmen Ulysses had, whether the Iliad or the Odyssey was written first, and whether too they were by the same author, and other questions of this kind which, if you keep them to yourself, in no way enhance your private knowledge, and if you publish them, make you appear more than a bore, more a bore than a scholar. But now the Romans too have been afflicted by the pointless enthusiasm for useless knowledge. Recently, I heard somebody reporting which Roman general first did this or that. Duilius first won a naval battle. Curius Dentatus first included elephants in a triumph. So far, how rude to use elephants. So far, these facts, even if they do not contribute to real glory, at least are concerned with exemplary services to the state. Such knowledge will not do us any good, but it interests us because of the appeal of these pointless facts. We can also excuse those who investigate, who first persuaded the Romans to embark on a ship. That was Claudius, who for this reason was called Codex, because a structure linking several wooden planks was called in antiquity a codex. Hence too the law tables are called codices, and even today the boats which carry provisions up the Tiber are called by the old-fashioned name Cordicarii. Doubtless too it is one of some importance to know that Valerius Corvinus first conquered Messana and was the first of the family of Valerii to be surnamed Messana from the name of the captured city, the spelling of which was gradually corrupted in everyday speech to Messala. Perhaps you will also allow someone to take seriously the fact that Lucius Sulla, all these names, man, first exhibited lions loose in the circus, though at other times they were shown in fetters, and that javelin throwers were sent by King Bocchus to kill them. This too may be excused. Maybe to you, Seneca. But does it serve any good purpose? To know that Pompey first exhibited in the circus a fight involving 18 elephants, pitting innocent men against them in a staged battle. History, man. A leader of the state, and, as we are told, a man of notable kindliness among the leaders of old, he thought it would be a memorable spectacle to kill human beings in a novel way. Are they to fight to the death? Not good enough. Are they to be torn to pieces? Not good enough. Let them be crushed by animals of enormous bulk. It would be better for such things to be forgotten, lest in the future someone in power might learn about them and not wish to be outdone in such a piece of inhumanity. Thank you for clarifying that that was all inhumane, Seneca, to the animals too, not just the humans. It was inanimal. Oh, what darkness does great prosperity cast over our minds. He thought himself beyond nature's laws at the time that he was throwing so many crowds of wretched men to wild creatures from abroad, when he was setting such disparate creatures against each other, when he was shedding so much blood in front of the Roman people, who themselves were soon to be forced by him to shed their own blood. But later, he himself, betrayed by Alexandrian treachery, offered himself to be stabbed by the lowest slave, only then realizing that his surname, Great, was an empty boast. But to return to the point from which I digressed, and that was him, not me, and to illustrate how some people spend useless efforts on these same topics, the man I referred to reported that Metellus, in his triumph, after conquering the Carthaginians in Sicily, alone among all the Romans, had 120 elephants led before his chariot, and that Sulla was the last of the Romans to have extended the Pomerium, and there's a star underneath that tells the religious boundary of a city. Thank you. Which it was the ancient practice to extend after acquiring Italian, but never provincial territory. Sorry, that was a long drawn out sentence. Is it better to know this than to know that the Aventine Hill, as he asserted, is outside the Pomerium for one of two reasons? Either because the plebs withdrew to it, or because when Remus took the auspices there, the births had not been favourable, and countless further theories that are either false or very close to lies. For even if you admit that they say all this in good faith, even if they guarantee the truth of their statements, whose mistakes will thereby be lessened? Whose passions restrained? Who will be made more free, more just, more magnanimous? Our Fabianus used to say that, Fabianus, remember him from part 2, used to say that sometimes he wondered whether it was better not to be involved in any researches than to get entangled in these. Of all people, only those at leisure who make time for philosophy, only those are really alive. For they not only keep a good watch over their own lifetimes, but they annex every age to theirs. Love that. All the years that have passed before them are added to their own. Yes, 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 absolutely. And the imagination of all the years to come as well. Unless we are very ungrateful. That was my bit. This bit, unless we are very ungrateful, is his bit. All those distinguished founders of holy creeds were born for us and prepared for us a way of life. By the toil of others we are led into the presence of things which have been brought from darkness into light. We are excluded from no age, but we have access to them all. My bit, not my bit. Quoting, takes a village to raise a child and maintain an adult. That's my bit. I added that. And if we are prepared in loftiness of mind to pass beyond the narrow confines of human weakness, there is a long period of time through which we can roam. We can argue with Socrates, express doubt with Carneades, cultivate retirement with the Epicurus, overcome human nature with the Stoics, and exceed its limits with the Cynics. Since nature allows us to enter into a partnership with every age, why not turn from this brief and transient spell of time and give ourselves wholeheartedly to the past, which is limitless and eternal and can be shared with better men than we? Those who rush about on social duties, disturbing both themselves and others, when they have duly finished their crazy round and have daily crossed everyone's threshold and passed by no open door, when they have carried around their self-interested greetings to houses that are miles apart, how few will they be able to see in a city so enormous and so distracted by varied desires? How many will there be who through sleepiness or self-indulgence or ungraciousness will exclude them? How many, after keeping them in an agony of waiting, will pretend to be in a hurry and rush past them? How many will avoid going out through a hall crowded with dependents and escape through a secret door as if it were not even more discourteous to deceive callers than to exclude them? How many, half asleep and sluggish after yesterday's drinking, will yawn insolently and have to be prompted 1,000 times in a whisper before, scarcely moving their lips, they can greet by name the poor wretches who have broken their own slumbers in order to wait on another's? You should rather suppose that those are involved in worthwhile duties who wish to have daily as their closest friends Zeno, Pythagoras, Democritus, and all of the other high priests of liberal studies, and Aristotle and Theophrastus. None of these will be too busy to see you. None of these will not send his visitor away happier and more devoted to himself. None of these will allow anyone to depart empty-handed. They are at home to all mortals by night and by day. None of these will force you to die, but all will teach you how to die. None of them will exhaust your years, but each will contribute his years to yours. With none of these will conversation be dangerous, or his friendship fatal, or attendance on him expensive. From them you can take whatever you wish. It will not be their fault if you do not take your fill from them. What happiness, what a fine old age awaits the man who has made himself a client of these. He will have friends whose advice he can ask on the most important and most trivial matters, whom he can consult daily about himself, who will tell him the truth without insulting him and praise him without flattery, who will offer him a pattern on which to model himself. We are in the habit of saying that it was not in our power to choose the parents who were allotted to us, that they were given to us by chance. But we can choose whose children we would like to be. There are households of the noblest intellects. Choose the one into which you wish to be adopted. Veganism, liberalism, socialism. For me personally, don't judge. And you will inherit not only their name, but their property too. Nor will this property need to be guarded meanly or grudgingly. The more it is shared out, the greater it will become. What the world needs now. My line, not mine, but you know. These will offer you a path to immortality and raise you to a point from which no one is cast down. This is the only way to prolong mortality, even to convert it to immortality. Honours, monuments, whatever the ambitious have ordered by decrees or raised in public buildings are soon destroyed. There is nothing that the passage of time does not demolish and remove. But it cannot damage the works which philosophy has consecrated. No age will wipe them out, no age diminish them. The next and every following age will only increase the veneration for them, since envy operates on what is at hand, but we can more openly admire things from a distance. So the life of the philosopher extends widely. He is not confined by the same boundary as are others. He alone is free from the laws that limit the human race, and all ages serve him as though he were a god. Some time has passed. He grasps it in his recollection. Time is present. He uses it. Time is to come. He anticipates it. This combination of all times into one gives him a long life. But life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. That bears repeating. Life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. When they come to the end of it, the poor wretches realise, too late, that for all this time they have been preoccupied in doing nothing. And the fact that they sometimes invoke death is no proof that their lives seem long. Their own folly afflicts them with restless emotions which hurl themselves upon the very things they fear. They often long for death because they fear it. Profound. Nor is this a proof that they are living for a long time, that the day often seems long to them, or that they complain that the hours pass slowly until the time fixed for dinner arrives. For as soon as the preoccupations fail them, they are restless with nothing to do, not knowing how to dispose of their leisure or make the time pass, and so they are anxious for something else to do. Talked about this in vlogs, haven't I? We're always looking for the next thing. Perhaps I'm quite stoic. Sorry. They are restless with nothing to do, not knowing how to dispose of their leisure or make the time pass, and so they are anxious for something else to do. And all the intervening time is wearisome, really. It is just as when a gladiatorial show has been announced, or they are looking forward to the appointed time of some other exhibition or amusement. They want to leap over the days in between. Any deferment of the longed-for event is tedious to them. Yet the time of the actual enjoyment is short and swift, and made much shorter through their own fault. For they dash from one pleasure to another and cannot stay steady in one desire. I've talked about this, just not in these words. Me and him, we know stuff. Their days are not long but odious. On the other hand, how short do the nights seem, which they spend drinking or sleeping with harlots. Hence the lunacy of the poets, who encouraged human frailty by their stories in which Jupiter, seduced by the pleasures of love-making, is seen to double the length of night. What else is it but to inflame our vices when they court the gods to endorse them? And as a precedent for our failings, they offer and excuse the wantonness of the gods. Can the nights, which they purchase so dearly, not seem much too short to these people? They lose the day in waiting for the night, and the night in fearing the dawn. Even their pleasures are uneasy and made anxious by various fears, and at the very height of their rejoicing, the worrying thought steals over them, how long will this last? This feeling has caused kings to bewail their power, and they were not so much delighted by the greatness of their fortune as terrified by the thought of its inevitable end. When that most arrogant king of Persia, Xerxes, who was kind of sexy in 300, it's got to be said. Oh, I'm sorry, I do this. When that most arrogant king of Persia, Xerxes, was deploying his army over vast plains and could not number it, but had to measure it, he wept, because in 100 years of that huge army, not a soul would be alive. But he who was weeping was the very man who would bring their fate upon them, and would destroy some on the sea, some on land, some in battle, some in flight. Cannons, I suppose. And in a very short time would wipe out all those whose 100th year he was afraid. 100th year. For whose 100th year he was afraid. And what of the fact that even their joys are uneasy? The reasons that they are not based on firm causes, but they are agitated as groundlessly as they arise. But what kind of times can those be, do you think, which they themselves admit are wretched, since even the joys by which they are exalted and raised above humanity are pretty corrupt? All the greatest blessings create anxiety, and fortune is never less to be trusted than when it is fairest. Not keen on that line. To preserve prosperity, we need other prosperity, and to support the prayers which have turned out well, we have to make other prayers. Whatever comes our way by chance is unsteady, and the higher it rises, the more liable it is to fall. Furthermore, what is doomed to fall delights. What is doomed to fall delights no one. So it is inevitable that life will not just very short, but very miserable. So it is inevitable that life will be not just very short, but very, very miserable for those who acquire by great toil what they must keep by greater toil. They achieve what they want laboriously. Damn it. They achieve what they want laboriously. They possess what they have achieved anxiously. And meanwhile, they take no account of time that will never more return. New preoccupations take the place of the old. Hope excites more hope, and ambition more ambition. They do not look for an end to their misery, but simply change the reason for it. We have found our own public honours a torment, and we spend more time on someone else's. We have stopped labouring as candidates, and we start canvassing for others. We have given up the troubles of a prosecutor and taken on those of a judge. A man stops being a judge and becomes president of a court. He has grown old in the job of managing the property of others for a salary, and then spends all his time looking after his own. Marius was released from army life to become busy in the consulship. Quintius hastens to get through his dictatorship, but he will be summoned back to it from the plough. Scipio will go against Carthaginians before he is experienced enough for such an undertaking. Victorious over Hannibal, victorious over Antiochus, distinguished in his own consulship, and a surety for his brothers. If he had not himself forbidden it, he would have been set up beside Jupiter. But discord in the state will harass its saviour, And after as a young man he has scorned honours fit for the gods, at length when old he will take delight in an ostentatiously stubborn exile. There will always be causes for anxiety, whether due to prosperity or to wretchedness. Life will be driven on through a succession of preoccupations. We shall always long for leisure, but never enjoy it. Quick break for a brew, my love. I just had a little breaky to make a coffee. It's weird because it's like I could have been his mate. I mean, he's writing to Paulinius right here. And so, my dear Paulinius, extract yourself from the crowd, and as you have been storm-tossed more than your age deserves, you must at last retire into a peaceful harbour. Consider how many waves you have encountered, how many storms, some of which you have sustained in private life, and some you have brought upon yourself in public life. Your virtue has for long enough been shown. When you were a model of active industry, try how it will manage in leisure. The greater part of your life, certainly the better part, has been devoted to the state. Take some of your own time for yourself too. I am not inviting you to idle or purposeless sloth, or to down all your natural energy in sleep and the pleasures that are dear to the masses. That is not to have repose. When you are retired and enjoying peace of mind, you will find to keep you busy more important activities than all those you have performed so energetically up to now. Indeed, you are managing the accounts of the world as scrupulously as you would another person's, as carefully as your own, as conscientiously as the state's. You are winning affection in a job which it is hard to avoid ill will. In which it is hard to avoid ill will. But believe me, it is better to understand the balance sheet of one's own life than of the corn trade. Slip whatever into corn trade, do you know what I mean? You must recall that vigorous mind of yours, supremely capable of dealing with the greatest responsibilities from a task which is certainly honourable but scarcely suited to the happy life, and you must consider that all your youthful training in liberal studies was not directed to this end, that many thousands of measures of corn might safely be entrusted to you. You had promised higher and greater things of yourself. There will not be wanting men who are completely worthy and hard-working. Stolid pack animals are much more fit for carrying loads than thoroughbred horses. Whoever subdued their noble speed with a heavy burden. Consider too how much anxiety you have in submitting yourself to such a weight of responsibility. You are dealing with the human belly. A hungry people neither listens to reason nor is mollified by fair treatment or swayed by any appeals. Quite recently, within a few days after Gaius Caesar died, still feeling very upset, if the dead have feelings, because he saw that the Roman people were still surviving with a supply of food for 7 or at most 8 days, while he was building bridges with boats and playing with the resources of the empire. We faced the worst of all afflictions, even to those under siege, a shortage of provisions, His imitation of a mad foreign king doomed in his pride nearly cost the city destruction and famine and the universal collapse that follows famine. What then must those have felt who had charge of the corn supply when they were threatened with stones, weapons, fire, and Gaius? With a huge pretense, they managed to conceal the great evil lurking in the vitals of the state, and assuredly they had good reason. For certain ailments must be treated while the patient is unaware of them. Knowing about their disease has caused the death of many. Quick break while I deal with my pussy. There'll be added crunching sound effects to this next part of the reading. Just eating biscuits. The last line was, for certain ailments must be treated while the patient is unaware of them. Knowing about their disease has caused the death of many. Very profound line. You hear that a lot about cancer. As in, people suddenly become very ill on their diagnosis. You know. You must retire to these pursuits which are quieter, safer, and more important. Do you think it is the same thing whether you are overseeing the transfer of corn into granaries unspoilt by the dishonesty and... Hi, would you like to have a quick chat about philosophy? Do you have feline philosophers? Right. And do they carry a similar message to Seneca and the field of Stoic philosophy? Sis? Do they? Excuse me, I asked you a question. Do they carry the same kind of philosophy as Stoic? She's chosen to ignore me. And so I'll ignore her. And I have no idea where I was up to. This is what she does. See, she distracts me shockingly. I'll start from that line. Do you think it is the same thing whether you are overseeing the transfer of corn into granaries unspoilt by the dishonesty and carelessness of the shippers, and taking that it does not get damp and then ruined through heat, and that it tallies in measure and weight, or whether you take up these sacred and lofty studies from which you will learn the substance of God and his will, his mode of life, his shape, what fates await your soul, where nature lays us to rest when released from our bodies, what is the force which supports all the heaviest elements of this world at the centre, suspends the light elements above, carries fire to the highest part, and sets the stars in motion with their proper changes, and learn other things in succession which are full of tremendous marvels. You really should leave the ground and turn your thoughts to these studies. Now, while the blood is hot, you should make your way with vigour to better things. In this kind of life you will find much that is worth your study, the love and practice of the virtues, forgetfulness of the passions, the knowledge of how to live and die, and a life of deep tranquillity. Indeed, the state of all who are preoccupied in wretched, but the most wretched are those who are toiling not even at their own preoccupations, but must regulate their sleep by another's, and their walk by another's pace, and obey orders in those freest of all things, loving and hating. If such people want to know how short their lives are, let them reflect how small a portion is their own. So when you see a man repeatedly wearing the robe of office, or one whose name is often spoken in the forum, do not envy him. these things are won at the cost of life, in order that 1 year may be dated from their names. They will waste all their own years. Life has left some men struggling at the start of their careers before they could force their way to the height of their ambition. Some men, after they have crawled through 1,000 indignities to the supreme dignity, have been assailed by the gloomy thought that all their labours were but for the sake of an epitaph. Some try to adjust their extreme old age to new hopes as though it were youth, but find its weakness fails them in the midst of efforts that overtax it. It is a shameful sight when an elderly man runs out of breath while he is pleading in court for litigants who are total strangers to him, and trying to win the applause of the ignorant bystanders. It is disgraceful to see a man collapsing in the middle of his duties, worn out more by his lifestyle than his labours. Disgraceful too is it when a man dies in the midst of going through his accounts, and his heir, long kept waiting, smiles in relief. I cannot resist telling you of an instance that occurs to me. Sextus Tyrannius was an old man, known to be scrupulous and diligent, who, when he was 90, at his own request, was given retirement from his office by Gaius Caesar. He then ordered himself to be laid out on his bed and lamented by the assembled household as though he were dead. The house bewailed its old master's leisure, and did not cease its mourning until his former job was restored to him. Is it really so pleasant to die in harness? That is the feeling of many people. Their desire for their work outlasts their ability to do it. They fight against their own bodily weaknesses, and they regard old age as a hardship on no other grounds than it puts them on the shelf. The law does not make a man a soldier after 50 or a senator after 60. Men find it more difficult to gain leisure from themselves than from the law. Meanwhile, as they rob and are robbed, as they disturb each other's peace, as they make each other miserable, their lives pass without satisfaction, without pleasure, without mental improvement. No one keeps death in view. No one refrains from hopes that look far ahead. Indeed, some people even arrange things that are beyond life. Massive tombs, dedications of public buildings, shows for their funerals. I'm still going to be doing that. And ostentatious burials. But in truth, such people's funerals should be conducted with torches and wax tapers, as though they had lived the shortest of lives. And that, my dears, concludes Seneca on the shortness of life. So here's what I love about it. I love that I have this preconceived idea of ancient Greece that the kind of life expectancy was, around 50. I don't know why I have that belief. Maybe because of Victorian England. So to hear that somebody was 90 is a revelation to me. I mean, that was honestly a beautiful and fascinating read, and some bits of it really kind of stuck in my craw because it is so pertinent and it is so relative, and this is 2,000 years ago, and nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. And although this may be obviously written a certain way in a certain language with a certain syntax, the messages are exactly the same as, and I'm not comparing myself with Seneca necessarily, but I think I must have some part of me that is in that field of Stoic philosophy, because I do talk about things very similar, but said from a 51-year-old queer man's Oldham perspective, you know, about how we are all, I've said it in so many vlogs about how we're all eagerly always rushing to the next thing, watch that box set, what now, and maybe that is the thing that does hasten our lives, and how we should think about not necessarily the gods and the liberal priests and but I think that, you know, stop. The message is, you give so much of yourself to your work, to your job. Look at the world around you. Actually take as much interest in it as you do in what you do, and acknowledge it and appreciate it and enjoy it and take time with it. It's a fascinating read, really fascinating little read, and I love that it was basically a kind of letter to Paulinius. What a good friend he must have considered him to write something like that. So full of important lessons and wisdom. Anyway, thus concludes, and I'm so glad to have completed it, and once again this is dedicated to Star Cradle. Thank you for the reminder, my love. We can learn a lot from this, and so maybe, you know, maybe I do invite you to listen to all 3 parts again. You don't have to watch just me sat here with a book, do you know what I mean? But listen to all, if you can get past me and me constant bloody commentary. Fascinating. Hope you enjoyed it. I maybe will do another reading at some point in the future, who knows what that will be. But I'm glad to have completed this one, and if you've stuck with it, thanks so much. I'll see you again very soon, and until then, please be excellent to yourself and each other.